documentary, Forget Me Not, as 3-year-old Emilio prepares to start school, his family finds itself embroiled in a challenge all too common for children with disabilities: to secure the right to an inclusive education. Cornered in one of the most segregated education systems, New York City public schools, filmmaker Olivier and his wife Hilda turn the camera on themselves and their child with Down syndrome as they navigate a system originally designed to silo children with disabilities. Here, Hilda Bernier shares more about their story.
Your film, Forget Me Not, does a phenomenal job of showing the injustice that children with disabilities and their parents are unfairly dealt. Regarding the education system in New York City, instead of the system helping, it seems that it's done more to hinder and to hurt, with protocol based on disabilities as opposed to capabilities. You've had to fight against the Department of Education, who should have been fighting for you. Regarding the Department of Education, Hilda, what have you learned about the system in this battle that you've been having?
The main takeaway that I have from this whole experience is that the education system, needs to make a lot of changes in order to prepare schools to deal with all kinds of students. And coming into, when you have a child with a disability and you're coming into this journey, you need to be prepared and informed, and you need to be prepared to advocate for your child's best interest. Because if you haven't identified what's your child's best interest and what will work best for your child, then other people are going to make the decisions for you. And they are not necessarily decisions that will work on your child's behalf. There are systems in place that are designed to track students with disabilities into segregated settings, for example, which is, part of our story. It's how, from a very early age, our son was being recommended to be segregated just because of the fact that he had Down syndrome, which is a visible disability, it's sometimes for administrators and professionals in the field, it's very easy for them to justify their decisions. So I learned that I need to be his best advocate, and I need to fight the good fight. I am not here to break war with I will work with the education system to make it work for my child. But it's a work that has to be done in conjunction. We have to be able to work together. We have to be able to be on the same page. And if we are not, we need to find common ground. So the system has to do a lot of work when it comes to prepare schools for all kinds of students. But as a parent, when that doesn't happen, we have to make sure that we make it work for the kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And like to your point, to be on the same page, and if possible, to be on the same team, to be on the same team for our children. So here's the thing. Often teachers will grade on a curve to improve grades. When it comes to curves, when Emilio was tested for his IEP, you were told he wasn't even on the curve. You were shown a scale. This was such a powerful part in the movie for me. I just was in tears about it.
Yeah.
You were shown a scale on which you were told he couldn't be found. There wasn't a place for him. If that doesn't speak volumes about a student not being seen, I don't know what does. I can only imagine what you must have been feeling at that time, at that meeting. Do you feel that their protocol was prioritized over his potential?
Oh, protocol was definitely prioritized. It was all about protocols. It was all about that curve. It was all about how his deficits were more dominant than his strengths. And that was very heartbreaking, because I have been observing my child on a daily basis work with all his early intervention therapists, and I know what his strengths are. So at that moment, where they were telling me that he wasn't even in the curve, it's like, for me, it was very disorienting, because that was not the child I was watching every day.
Mm-hmm.
And you have these evaluators, in particular at this point in their early development, that come to your house and they make these evaluations and they sit with your child for like an hour. People that have never seen him before. And they do what they do, and if the kid is having a bad day, or it's not feeling well, like there's so many factors that can play in on the performance of a child that's been put into that position. But they come for an hour and they sit, and then they come up with these reports, and when you look at that, you're like, oh my God, like, who is this kid?
Right.
Who is this kid? Like, this is not what I am looking. So the protocol was prioritized. The strengths were not taken into consideration when it came to make a recommendation. And the fact that the strengths are mostly overlooked, it's very upsetting. So yeah, you have to really set your mind to set the record straight.
Right.
Because if you don't do it, your child cannot speak for, at that point in time, Emilio was below age 3. He wasn't even 3 years old. He was moving from one step to another. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, okay, so they want to put my soon to be 3-year-old child in a segregated class, just because this evaluation, it's putting him in putting his abilities in such a such a poor light.
Right.
It was just one of those things that you can never be prepared to hear that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like, when you're coming in, you're not thinking about that, because your child. So after meeting them for for the first time, I would say I would, I would, I always like to think the best. I have a lot of faith in humanity, and I always like to think that people are good and well-intentioned. But when the systems are not in place to support your child, and people are making decisions based on curves and charts and assessments that don't find him anywhere, then you have to really get ready for to fight and advocate for what you believe that is the right thing for your child.
Well, so in order to let's talk for a moment about inclusivity. So in order to create a truly inclusive society, once a disability is acknowledged, it must be accepted, but that's still not enough. It must then be appreciated. So it's like, as a friend of mine who has a son with Down syndrome shared with me, there's something special in that extra chromosome. There is so much about your son, and this is me just watching your film, that I can tell just from watching a film how much there is to love and appreciate about Emilio. So what is it, question for you now is, what is it that you appreciate about him the most with regard to his disability? What is it that you appreciate?
Emilio is a very authentic human being, and that is something that I need to apply to my own life. And so I really admire that transparency and that honesty that he carries along with him. I believe, like, if we could all live our lives like that, we would be so much better. We would be more willing to accept and learn from each other and acknowledge when things are difficult, and when things are fantastic. Emilio, he's so authentic and transparent, that he will let you know what he needs, what he wants, what he's not comfortable with, and I feel that is making me, it's turning me into a better mother, and a better member of my community, because now through him I have the ability to be more true to myself, to my friends, to my family. I think that authenticity is very, very, has made a huge impact in my life.
Yeah, what a beautiful lesson to be able to learn from our children, from your child. There is so much value in our diversity. So, as opposed to segregating, we need to be integrating for the benefit of everyone, right? Because when it comes to Emilio in an integrated classroom, there is a value to be found on both sides. So I'd love to hear, in your words, two things. What is the win for your son with integration, full integration, and what is the win for other students who are not disabled?
So there are many wins for him. It is known that peer modeling is very important for children with Down syndrome, because they're very visual learners. So they, and I can speak for Emilio. Like, he takes it all in. He has this ability to absorb everything that it's happening in his environment. So I think he gets a lot from from being in an inclusive setting, because he has the opportunity to see how everybody navigates their environment, the same environment, how they they can coexist together in the same spaces, and more importantly, it allows him to become part of the community. He, in, inclusion is so important, and just the fact that he has the opportunity to be included, it opens the doors for him to so many things. Like recently he was able to start a dance class and a karate class, and he's like living his best life doing all these things, and being, that's what inclusion means. Inclusion means that we are all able to navigate the same spaces, and we can make it work. So in that regard, I am very very satisfied with the way he's handling everything, because he's getting so much from it.
Right. So, and there's so much, again, he has so many wins to gain with inclusion, with this integration. For the other students in the class, for those who are not, what do they win? What is their win from having Emilio there?
So there's plenty of research that says that neurotypical children benefit from having children with disabilities on their classrooms. But besides that, what's more important is that they can learn that the differences that they have can be used to learn from each other, and it can help them become more empathetic human beings. Because something that Olivier also always brings out to the conversation is that how when he was in school, he never had anyone with Down syndrome in his classroom, or anyone with an intellectual disability, or even physical disabilities in the classroom. So when he came to parenting a child with Down syndrome, he didn't know what to do or how to handle it, because he's never been exposed to anyone with a disability. So that opportunity that neurotypical children have to share their life experiences with them is so important, and it can only enrich their lives. There is nothing that says that neurotypical children are hindered by the presence of children with disabilities in the classrooms. You can try to look for that research, but it's nowhere to be found. That is something that lives on the minds of the families and people that have been following a system that is made to separate instead of bring together everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. So it goes back to this system, this broken system that needs to be repaired or just re-engineered completely. Parents serve several roles in the lives of their children. In addition to Emilio's mother, you are, let's see, should we just begin? Caregiver, health provider, activity coordinator and entertainer, emotional nurture, relationship coach. It goes on and on and on. As you mentioned earlier, and as we can speak now, as his mother, one of the most important roles that you have to play is as his advocate. That said, for parents who have a child with a disability, what would you like them to know? What advice, someone who's in your shoes and having a hard time dealing with what advice do you have?
Um, I would like to encourage parents to define their priorities as a family, and what are their goals when it comes to educating their children with disabilities. And because once you have set your priorities, and you work towards that, you can find ways to fight the good fight. And that's the beauty of it, is that when you have an idea of what you want your child to achieve, or like how you want your child to get from A to B, the road can take you in many directions, because this is not a straight path forward. And I know that, and many parents of children with disabilities know that it's the case. But when your priorities are set, it's you have a better picture of how you can accomplish those things. So, parents are the best advocates, and nobody can take that away from them. So fight the good fight.
Fight the good fight. And I love, that's amazing advice, just to set the priorities, like, draw your own lines and say, this is what will be acceptable, this is not acceptable, and then just fight on, right? And again, that's something that you showed so beautifully in your film. I guess my last question for you today is, for the parents out there who have a child without a disability, what would you like them to know?
I'd like them to know that there's no need to be afraid. Children are more flexible and resilient than we could ever be. And there's so much that they can get from being alongside students with disabilities. So don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of inviting them to birthday parties. Don't be afraid of, let them be children together, because children see things very differently. And we cannot impose our prejudices and biases when there is so much more that they can gain from each other. So don't be afraid.
Yeah. Again, beautiful advice. It's very important for children with disabilities to be in those inclusive environments, but it's just as important for children who do not have a disability to have them there. And for so many reasons. Thank you so much for producing such a beautiful film that shares such an incredible story in such a beautiful way. And thank you for helping all of us become a bit more aware now. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.